I did the red wine steak experiment, and the results of that experiment absolutely blew my mind.
Big thanks to Kamada Joe for sponsoring this episode.
This is my steak. It is a beautiful and delicious picanha steak. The picanha is loved for its tenderness, for the amount of flavor, and the beautiful fat cap that sits on top of it that gives you an enormous amount of succulent flavor when it is grilled. The idea of this experiment is that we're going to mix red wine with steak to make that steak taste better. And here's how the experiment goes. For this experiment, I've chosen a beautiful Chianti red wine. Strong and fruity in flavors that will complement my steak perfect. And when you're doing an experiment like this, you want to pair the cost of the wine with the value of the steak. If the wine is expensive and your steak is cheap, it doesn't make any sense. If your steak is expensive but your wine is cheap, it's not going to make any sense either. So make sure you match the both and you get good results. But before we can put this steak in the wine, we need to prepare it first. And what we're about to do may sound crazy, but I'm going to carve into this steak, because this is the ridgeback picanha. And what these ridges are actually for, I'll show you later on in the recipe. Basically, we're creating individual steaks connected together with the last bit of meat. Place your picanha steak in a tray, pour on a delicious bottle of red Spanish wine, add a twig of thyme, a clove of garlic, 2 bay leaves, 2 teaspoons of ground pepper and 2 teaspoons of table salt. Mix it up a little bit and then set it in the fridge for 2 hours. And if you didn't carve into that picanha, I recommend letting it sit for 6 to 8 hours. While the picanha was soaking in its bath, picking up all those flavors, I fired up my new Kamada Joe Connected Joe, which I nicknamed the Kojo. The first thing that I did was load it up with some charcoal, switch it on and let the machine do the rest. It's just a press on the button and it started up all by itself, raising up to the right temperature where I want it to be, which in this case is 350 degrees Celsius. If you want to see all the details about exploring this grill and getting into it, check a couple videos back. For now, I'm going to take out the heat deflectors and set it up for direct grilling. This is the big reveal. 2 hours of marinating and the picanha looks like this. Whoa! It completely changed color. Look at it. It became red wine red. It smells like a really good bœuf bourguignon. Really nice, really fantastic. Even though it looks like a liver at the moment, which is not a great thing in itself, it really smells amazing. We got a little bit of that pepper still sitting on top of it, but we're just gonna leave that on. Now I really want to know what this tastes like and if we have a good effect with the red wine on our steak. There's only one way to find out, and that's by throwing it on a barbecue and start cooking. And the objective now is to sear the picanha with the fat cap towards the fire, which means we're gonna get a lot of flare-ups, but we're also gonna render down that fat and make it nice and tasty. Now I'm going to flip it, sear the other side, and get some Maillard effect on that meat. Wow, what a beauty. As you can see, the fat rendered down quite a bit, gotten a little bit crispy, which is exactly what I need. And the beef got a beautiful Maillard effect. The flames really tore into this and you can see the fat rendered down that sits in the outside of the beef. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. The same thing happened on the other side. This beef is not cooked yet, but we have that nice crust on the outside. And the thing that I notice the most is that we get a much darker crust when we are cooking with a wine marinated piece of beef. Somehow the Maillard effect got way darker than it would normally get with the regular beef. So now it's time for the rest of the recipe. And as you know, I used sangria as a wine and I want to pair it with more Spanish ingredients. So I've chosen some fouet and queso manchego. Both of these are absolutely freaking amazing by themselves. The queso manchego is quite a sturdy cheese, but it has a real nice touch to it. Light, delicate, sturdy. It's like really amazing. How can I explain an amazing cheese? It's like everything Spanish. It's like rough and tough, and at the same time it's delicate and it's soft and creamy and rich. Like the fouet. What are you looking for? You looking for this? Let's get this cheese sliced up. We want to go as thin as possible with a knife because we want the cheese for flavor, not for texture. Queso manchego. That's it. It's a Pyrenean mountain dog, Spanish side of the Pyrenean mountains. Why didn't I think of this before? It totally makes sense now.
Naturalmente, ¿qué habrías pensado?
I'm gonna strip the fouet of the skin. Let's slice up the fouet, and I wanna get slices just as thick and long as the cheese, so they pair really well. Don't worry about the white on the pig skin. It is all part of the fouet. Time to load up our picanha with the fouet and the cheese. Look at this. This is going to be absolutely freaking delicious. And now it starts to make sense that I didn't use the reverse sear method, because you understand that I would never be able to get a good sear on this picanha with all that delicious food inside of it. So for just this once, we're making an exception. To make sure that I get my temperatures right, I'm going to stick in a thermometer. Now I'll be using the meter wireless thermometer. This ensures that you always know what the right temperature is at your grill grit level, and if you need, you can adjust it. And I can't stress enough how important that is for cooking. If you want to cook your picanha right, if you want to get it to the spot on temperature, you need to be able to measure the core temperature of it. Even though I cut this into steaks, I will be able to read the core temperature, because I'm going to take that thermometer and stick it in that single steak, and that's the way I'm going to measure if the picanha is done. I'm going to take out the grill grates and set the barbecue up for indirect heat, which means I'm going to put in the heat deflectors, put the grill grates in, then I'm going to put my picanha in, pointing towards the heat source. So any radiation heat will get caught by that fat cap and it will render down while the rest of the beef is cooking slowly. I'm going to close the lid and just let the barbecue do its job. Fully automated, if you wanted to. Of course, you can go manual. It's kind of old school. This is my herb garden. As you can see, it's at the end of its term. The season is a little bit ending. It's getting a little bit colder, and I want to make the most of it while it's still here. So we're going to make a green sauce to go with that picanha that is freaking delicious. It's on our website. It's called the Green Fresh Spice Mix. You can look it up. We're starting with 50 grams of fresh parsley. And the reason why I love to use parsley out like this out of my garden, not because that it looks the best, but it tastes so much more powerful than when you buy it in a store. So it's definitely worth putting a couple of these plants in the garden in the beginning of the year. Just every now and then pluck a little bit of it. You're gonna need some thyme, and with thyme, if you pluck this from the garden, it has way more wooden stalks than if you get it in the store, which means you definitely have to get rid of these stalks. You can only use the leaves. I'm going to chop that real fine. I'm also going to peel and chop fine 3 garlic cloves. Peel and chop fine a white onion. Add a teaspoon of finishing salt, a teaspoon of fresh ground pepper, and about half a cup of olive oil. Mix it up and then it's done. It's time. Yes, notifications here, remove from the fire, even though the core temperature is 50 degrees and the target is 54. The reason that the app says take it off now is because it already takes into consideration that we need to rest this piece of meat. So let's get it off. Wow. The queso melted, the fat in the fouet started to melt as well, releasing all of its flavors onto our beautiful picanha steak. This thing looks absolutely freaking delicious. It's time to take it off. I'm gonna drizzle on a little bit of that green fresh spice mix, and be careful with it because it's very potent. Now it's time to plate it up properly like the Spanish would, which means we're gonna put it on a board with a little bit of fouet, some queso, and some fresh cut bread with some olives. And that is a proper Spanish meal. Wow. That's all I can say. Hungry, hungry, hungry. I want to dig into this. This looks so good. But I'm going to give you a quick tip. If you got a little bit of fresh bread, you got that green spice mix that we normally use for meat, just brush on a little bit on some bread and then put the bread and roast it on the barbecue. Just toast a couple of slices and it will become like a bruschetta. Real nice toasty. And they're gonna go freaking amazing with all of the rest in the ingredients. But I know you wonder, is that wine and that steak a good pair up? Well, let's test it. All right, I'm gonna go straight for it. Cut this in half. Let's take a look on the inside. Whoa, look at that. That is one beautiful masterpiece. All right, here we go. Whoa. This is really good. Funny thing is that the color of the red wine made the meat darker in color, as it did while grilling the steak, but the flavor of the red wine is kind of like a subtle marinade. It's really gentle, it's really nice to the steak. It doesn't take anything away, it just adds something. It's like when you drink a glass of wine with a good steak and you think, wow, this is perfection. It's like that, but in one bite. I recommend you try this recipe. You know where to find it. See you guys next time.